thanks so much for tuning in. You're watching BQ Prime. This is Infravisioning, and joining me on this conversation, as always, is Vinayak Chatterjee, the founder of the Infravision Foundation and infrastructure expert. The conversation today centers around a scheme that is not yet in the working, but it could actually be a potential revenue generator for the smallest income households in India. Let's talk about this idea and how it might actually come to pass. Thanks as always, Vinayak, for taking the time. And you've actually dubbed this Sooraj Se Rozgari, and you're talking about the rooftop solar voltaic scheme, or the use of solar panels on rooftops to generate income for the low-income households. How is this working?
Well, you will agree that it's really a very, very interesting and offbeat idea. And I've been wondering why it hasn't been pursued till now. You know, let's step back and take a look at what the government has been doing for the last many years in terms of reaching out on poverty alleviation programs and to put money in the pockets of people, particularly in rural India, who are, as we often say, disadvantaged and at the bottom of the pyramid income-wise. Now, you had the utilities reach out in terms of 24/7 electricity connections. You have states that give subsidized electricity to people who use less electricity. You have water tap connections in Jal Jeevan Mission of 24/7. You have Jan Dhan accounts and you have direct benefit transfers. You have subsidized LPG, rations, etc., etc. Now, step back and think for yourself. India is one of the countries blessed with huge amount of sunshine across the subcontinent. And it is a free source of energy that is falling on the rooftops of you, me, and everybody else, particularly our peasantry, our co-citizens in rural areas who have even a roof over their head and some courtyard space maybe, or maybe some degree of barren land. And you've got this free sunlight falling over their property, and we must be able to force ourselves to devise a strategy where we can use this God-given free sunlight to put some cash into the pockets of our brethren in the countryside as a means of, you may wish to call it, as a very, very innovative means of a kind of a direct benefit transfer or a poverty alleviation measure. But over to you.
So, as of now, there is a scheme that is run by the Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency, the ministry that relates to solar rooftop, or rather solar photovoltaic rooftop panels. But it's something else that you're proposing within this, right? It relates to the kind of compensation that is given, or the share of the energy that is generated for the lower income households, and a scale that you have proposed going up to the more affluent citizens and the corporates. Could you explain the scale to us?
Look, rooftop solar is not a new topic by itself. As part of our rooftop solar strategy and renewable energy strategy, there is an existing scheme in place by MNRE, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. And that basically gives a 40% subsidy to people, anybody who puts up a rooftop facility. But if you see the results, it has been quite disheartening. The scheme hasn't taken off. And the reasons for the scheme not having taken off are two. The way it is structured, the discoms don't see it as an advantage. They see it as a threat. They don't see great advantage in pushing the scheme. And the richer sections of society in cities and the richer households in rural, semi-urban areas, they have their contacts whereby many of them have been able to use the scheme. But for a poor farmer who has just a tiled roof on his head, first, he is remote, he's unconnected, he's uneducated up to a point, and therefore finds it very difficult to relate to the scheme. I mean, where will he buy modules from? How will he interact with the discoms? Who is going to pay him cash? Who is going to do the maintenance? So the scheme doesn't quite work as you come towards the larger population, which is not that savvy about these schemes. So we have actually crafted a scheme where we have an intermediary in place called a developer who is a private businessman, and can be positioned as an intermediary between the state and a rooftop owner, and in this process, these developers called rooftop energy developers themselves develop as a kind of new entrepreneurship opportunity in rural India, where they take these solar panels, and we are proposing 100% subsidy, 100% subsidy for the poorer sections of people, and they are well defined. You know, the Ayushman Bharat and other schemes define this category. Put it on their rooftops, and the developer then takes the full responsibility of picking up the modules from the state Renewable Development Agency, which is anyway proposed as an outreach arm of IREDA, the Indian Renewable Energy Development Association. And this entire establishment takes it down to the grassroots level. So a developer is positioned, 100% subsidy is given to the people at the bottom of the pyramid, and the sunlight monetizing on their roofs is thereby captured. Let's say very simply, half of it is used for household consumption, which saves on the electricity bill, and half of it is sold back to people who purchase that electricity, whether it is a DISCOM or a power trading company or an institutional buyer or whatever that's defined in the working paper. And therefore, in that basis, is able to get some cash into the pockets of these households. Our estimation is that depending on the interpretation and the final shape of the scheme, a rural household could get anywhere up to 6,000 rupees in cash as part of this scheme.
Every year.
Yeah. Over to you. Over to you.
Okay. So let me understand this. The IREDA would then effectively be the body at the national level that oversees this through its hands in, or through the state development agencies in the various states. There would also be a new class of entrepreneur that is created, the developer, that will work as an intermediary between the final recipient of this subsidy and the IREDA or its state development agencies. Now, the question that arises is, if we're talking about 100% subsidy, what is the kind of cost to the government at the center? And is this going to be front-loaded? One would think so, because you would need to have quite a bit of capital that is going towards the creation of this capacity.
Well, technically, it will be front-loaded, but we have to see it in terms of the impact across the life cycle of the scheme. We are proposing this to be a 15-year scheme. And remember, there is a profit margin between the price at which the householder sells to the purchase of electricity and the cost of production, right? So there is a profit element, and that profit element, if well captured, significantly over the life cycle of the scheme brings down the subsidy element to the central government, if appropriately shared between the state and the center. And our estimation is that across the life of the scheme, surprise of surprises, the scheme does not cost the center net, after all the benefits are also factored in, more than 20,000 crores. Now, here we have schemes that are dishing out 50, 60, 70,000 crores under different stuff, and for about 100 lakh rural households, about 1 crore households, if this scheme is successful across the life of the project, the cost to the central exchequer is going to be about 20,000 crores. Now, and why we recommended IREDA is that once it gets into the bulk procurement of modules, and people have, and past evidence has been that central government agencies like EESL and others have been very successful in bringing down the prices because of bulk procurement, and then it can farm out the modules to the states, who then in turn across a agreed pro forma hand it over to the developer. The developer makes money as a rural entrepreneur. We create a new class of energy entrepreneurs in the districts, in the villages, who basically make money one time by installing it, by looking for customers, installing it on their rooftops. So they earn a commission by doing this. Then they get an annual operations and maintenance fee for maintaining it, and maybe a little cut on the profit depending on how the scheme works out. But a very, very detailed working paper prepared by one of my colleagues at the Infravision Foundation, Rasika Atwale, who is a distinguished fellow at the Infravision Foundation. She has done an enormous amount of cerebral thinking, putting all the figure work in place, and we are putting this paper out in the public domain soon for anybody to do a deep dive on the figures to satisfy himself or herself that the scheme is in some senses economically very well thought through. But
okay. So what is the kind of capacity that you're proposing will be created through this scheme? Because you're talking about 100 lakh households, which is a significant number. The question has always been with solar, and though you're saying that in India it's widely available, but it's also seasonal. So we're talking about a period of the year when it's not available. The requirement for energy, renewable energy, therefore, and feeding it into the grid has always been a question. I guess to a certain extent that is getting fixed by the IREDA being the one that is acquiring this solar from these households.
Look, seasonality is not a factor in solar. I mean, across the length and breadth of the country, the intensity of sunlight may be higher or lower in winter or summer. And obviously, during rains, it goes down. But seasonality is not such a factor. What we're looking at is that if our current working paper envisages 100 lakh low-income households, 20 lakh regular income households, and 8 lakh institutional and MSME customers in the hinterland, like panchayat offices, district hospitals, schools, etc., etc. So together we are looking at this scheme being able to install 20 gigawatts.
Okay.
And the 100% subsidy is not given to everybody. The 100% subsidy is only given to the lower income households, who in any case are beneficiaries of similar subsidies across different utilities. And we are proposing a 40% subsidy for the regular income households and a 20% subsidy for institutions and MSMEs. So we are also covering, small MSMEs, rural industries, small MSMEs in the hinterland, who should be motivated to participate in this scheme. So, but as to answer your question, it's 20 gigawatts is the expected. Now, if the scheme really succeeds, this 20 can become double, triple the amount. But we've been conservative in proposing 20 gigawatts.
For those that are unfamiliar with the scale of this that you're proposing, where does India's renewable capacity currently stand? Because it is now, if I'm not mistaken, 30% of total capacity?
Well, in terms of capacity, it is, but renewable energy projects work at about 20% PLF. So the capacity is defined at 100, its ability to produce electricity is 20. So in terms of electricity generation share, it is somewhere between 7 and 9%.
Which is how many gigawatts?
I won't be able to tell you that off the cuff.
Okay, but then we're talking about a significant addition to what I'm trying to get at is that if this scheme were to be put into place, then we're talking about a significant addition to the power generation capacity.
The current renewable capacity is hovering somewhere above 100,000 megawatts, right? Okay. And therefore, to add 20 gigawatts, which is 20,000 megawatts, is 1/5 the capacity.
Right.
Right. So therefore, it is significant in its ability to add to capacity. But in this case, we are saying that capacity can be added anywhere. The biggest renewable park is coming up in a place in Kutch called Khavda, where 30,000 megawatts, worth of electricity renewable is being developed as we speak. 30,000 megawatts. Okay. So renewable capacity can come in non-rooftop also. So the specific positioning of this scheme is not so much to add to capacity, but to provide a mechanism, a complete economic mechanism and a procedure whereby the free sunlight for a poor peasant can be converted into income for that household. So the beauty of the scheme is not that it adds to capacity, because I can add to capacity by putting it up large mega parks all over the countryside. But that feeds directly into the grid. How do you benefit
a revenue share, so to speak?
How do you benefit the poor where you have a God-gifted free source of energy falling on your rooftop? How do I enable a scheme for him to monetize it for the benefit of the household as a kind of a very innovative direct benefit transfer?
Sooraj Se Rozgari. Sooraj Se Rozgari is what you called it. And it seems like a win-win. We'll have to see if this actually pans out. But Vinayak, thank you so much as always for taking the time. Interesting concept to say the least.
Thank you very much. Been a pleasure talking to you as always.